She learned to bleed quietly until someone heard the silence louder than her screams. The manor smelled of old money and older cruelty. Elara Winters had grown used to both. At 23, her world had shrunk to the dimensions of service corridors and stone floors that punished her twisted ankle with every step. The injury from childhood had never healed properly. Her family had been too poor for doctors, and the Ashford estate too indifferent to care about the limp of a scullery maid. She moved through the shadows of the great house like something already half-erased, invisible, disposable, the kind of girl whose name the family never bothered to learn, referring to her only as the crippled one when they needed someone to blame. Tonight, it was the wine. Lady Ashford's 27th birthday celebration filled the ballroom with crystal laughter and champagne promises. Elara had been carrying a tray of vintage Bordeaux, bottles worth more than her yearly wages, when her bad ankle betrayed her on the marble stairs. The sound of shattering glass cut through Mozart like a death knell. The room fell silent. Lady Ashford's face transformed from porcelain beauty to something reptilian. "You clumsy, worthless creature." Elara's knees found the floor instinctively, her hands already bleeding from the glass. "I'm sorry, my lady, I'm so sorry." "Sorry?" Lady Ashford's laugh was silver bells hiding poison. "Do you know what that wine cost? More than you'll ever be worth." The first blow came from Thomas, the head butler, a backhanded strike that split Elara's lip. She tasted copper and humiliation. The guests watched with the detached curiosity of Romans at the Colosseum. Entertainment between courses. "Please," Elara whispered, but the word died in her throat. Thomas grabbed her by the hair, dragging her toward the servants' entrance. "Basement, now! You'll learn what happens to girls who cost this family money." That's when the temperature dropped. It happened so suddenly that breath became visible, champagne glasses frosted over, and the candles in the chandeliers flickered as if something ancient had passed through their flames. The crowd murmured nervously, pulling shawls tighter, looking for the source of the sudden cold. He stood in the doorway. Elara had never seen him before, but everyone else clearly had. The way they stepped back, the way Lady Ashford's cruelty melted into something closer to fear. He was tall, dressed in black that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. His face was beautiful in the way ruins are beautiful, all sharp angles and weathered grace. His eyes were dark amber, old beyond measurement, and they were fixed entirely on her, on the girl bleeding on the floor. "Remove your hand from her hair," he said quietly. His voice carried no threat, only certainty, the kind that came from centuries of being obeyed. Thomas released her immediately, stumbling backward. The stranger crossed the ballroom in 3 impossible strides. He knelt beside Elara, and she realized 2 things simultaneously. First, that he cast no reflection in the polished marble floor, and second, that she wasn't afraid of him. She should have been. "What is your name?" he asked, and his voice was velvet over stone. "Elara," she whispered. "Elara." He repeated it like a prayer, like something worth remembering. Then he looked up at Lady Ashford with eyes that had witnessed the fall of empires. "How much does she owe you for the wine?" "Lord Constantine, this is a servant matter." "How much?" Lady Ashford swallowed. £800. He pulled a wallet from his coat and counted out bills without looking at them, dropping them on the wine-stained floor. "There, her debt is paid." Then he stood, offering Elara his hand. His skin was cool, but not unpleasantly so. "And now I'm buying out her contract. Name your price." The room held its breath. Lady Ashford's eyes narrowed. "She's not for sale." "Everything in this house is for sale," Constantine said softly, "including your family's reputation. Shall we discuss what I know about your husband's ventures in the East End? Or would you prefer I simply pay you £10,000 for one crippled maid, and we all pretend this was a civilized transaction?" Alara watched Lady Ashford's face cycle through rage, calculation, and finally defeated greed. "Done." Constantine helped Alara to her feet. She swayed, dizzy from blood loss and shock, and he steadied her with a gentleness that seemed impossible in a man who just bought a human being like livestock. "She serves no one," he announced to the frozen crowd. "Not anymore, not ever again." As he guided her toward the door, she whispered, "Why?" He looked down at her, and something ancient and sorrowful moved behind his eyes. "Because I've lived 800 years, Ilara, and in all that time, I've never seen someone bleed so quietly. I've never seen someone so used to being broken that they apologized for the hands that broke them." Outside, a carriage waited, black lacquer and silver fittings, horses that stamped nervously as if they sensed what their master was. "I don't understand," Alara said as he helped her inside. "You will." Constantine settled across from her, his face half-shadowed by streetlight. "I'm taking you somewhere safe, somewhere you'll heal. And then—" He paused, choosing words carefully. "Then I'm going to teach you that mercy isn't weakness, that surviving isn't the same as living, that you were never the thing they tried to make you believe you were." "What am I?" she asked, her voice barely audible. His smile was sad and infinite. "Something precious that they tried to destroy. But I've learned that broken things, when properly healed, become stronger than anything whole ever could be." The carriage pulled away from the manor, leaving behind the gas-lit world of cruelty and champagne. Alara watched the house recede through the window, every painful memory contained within those walls growing smaller, smaller, until they disappeared into the London fog. She didn't know where she was going, but for the first time in her life, she wasn't afraid of what came next. Constantine's estate existed in a place where Victorian London dissolved into something older. The carriage traveled for what felt like hours, but couldn't have been more than 20 minutes, passing through wrought iron gates that opened without being touched, down a drive lined with trees that had witnessed centuries. The manor itself was Gothic in the true sense, all stone and stained glass, and towers that pierced the fog like accusations. But unlike the Ashford house, this place didn't smell of cruelty. It smelled of age and books and something Alara couldn't name. Later, she would learn it was the scent of safety. A woman waited in the entrance hall. She was perhaps 40, with kind eyes, and the bearing of someone who'd once been broken and had chosen to become whole anyway. "This is Mrs. Halloway," Constantine said. "She'll help you settle in." Alara clutched her bleeding hands to her chest. "I don't have any belongings to settle." Mrs. Halloway's smile was gentle. "Then we'll remedy that, won't we? Come, dear, let's get you cleaned up." Constantine caught her arm as she passed, that same careful touch, as if she were made of something more fragile than bone. "Ilara, you're not a servant here. You're a guest. If anyone treats you otherwise, you tell me. Understood?" She nodded, though understanding was still miles away. The room Mrs. Halloway led her to was impossibly large. A 4-poster bed dominated one wall, draped in burgundy velvet. A fireplace crackled with fresh logs, and everywhere windows, tall arched windows that looked out onto gardens where moonlight painted everything silver. "First time having your own room?" Mrs. Halloway asked knowingly. "First time having windows I'm allowed to look through," Alara admitted. Mrs. Halloway set down a basin of warm water and began cleaning Alara's hands with practiced gentleness. The cuts weren't as bad as they'd seemed. Glass wounds always bled dramatically, but there were older scars beneath them. Burns, belt marks, the archaeology of systematic cruelty. "How long have you worked for Lord Constantine?" Alara asked. 14 years. He found me in a workhouse in Liverpool. My husband had drunk himself to death and left me with debts I couldn't pay. I was going to be sent to debtor's prison. Mrs. Halloway wrapped Ilara's hands in clean bandages. He paid my debts, gave me a position here, never once asked me to be anything other than myself. Why would he do that? Mrs. Halloway met her eyes. Because once, a very long time ago, someone showed him mercy when he didn't deserve it, and he spent centuries trying to repay that debt. A knock interrupted them. A young woman entered carrying an armful of clothing, simple but beautiful dresses in dark colors, nothing like the rough servant's uniform Ilara had worn for years. "I'm Margaret," she said cheerfully. "Cook's daughter, Mrs. Halloway thought these might fit you. They were mine before I grew too tall for them." Ilara touched the fabric hesitantly. "I can't accept—" "You can," Mrs. Halloway said firmly. "And you will. This household has strange rules, Ilara, but the most important one is this. When someone offers you kindness, you take it. You don't apologize for needing it." After they left, Ilara stood alone in her room, and tried to process what was happening. She'd been bought. That was slavery, wasn't it? Except Constantine had said she served no one. Except she had windows, and soft sheets, and people who looked at her like she was human. She limped to the window, her ankle throbbing from the day's violence. The gardens below were labyrinthine, hedge mazes and stone statues of angels with their hands covering their faces. In the distance, she could see a structure that looked like a chapel, its windows dark. "It's beautiful in daylight," Constantine's voice said from the doorway. She turned, startled. He hadn't knocked, but then it was his house. "Though I rarely see it then." "Why not?" His smile was cryptic. "I keep unusual hours." He moved into the room with that same impossible grace, all controlled power and ancient courtesy. He'd changed from his formal evening wear into simpler clothes, dark trousers and a white shirt that somehow made him look more dangerous rather than less. "You have questions," he said. "Ask them. Why did you buy me?" "Because watching you apologize for being beaten made me remember things I'd rather forget." "What things?" He looked out the window at the gardens he couldn't enjoy in sunlight. "I was born in 1224, Ilara, in what's now Ukraine, though we called it something else then. I was the youngest son of a minor boyar, nobility that meant nothing, wealth that was borrowed, power that was illusion." His reflection was absent from the glass. "When I was 17, I killed a man in a duel over a girl whose name I can no longer remember. My father disowned me, cast me out with nothing." Ilara sat on the edge of the bed, watching him talk to ghosts only he could see. "I spent 3 years starving, stealing, doing things I won't burden you with describing. And one night, in a monastery where I'd broken in to steal chalices to sell, I collapsed from hunger. A monk found me. His name was Brother Maxim." Constantine's voice softened with ancient grief. "He should have turned me in, should have let me die. Instead, he fed me, clothed me, taught me to read, showed me that suffering doesn't have to make us cruel, that sometimes it can make us kind instead." "What happened to him?" "Raiders came, burned the monastery. I tried to save him, but—" He paused. "I failed, and that night, wounded and dying in the ashes, something found me, something old. It offered me eternity in exchange for one choice: to use that eternity to perpetuate suffering, or to spend it preventing what I'd become, someone who'd forgotten their own humanity." Ilara's throat tightened. "You're—" "Vampire, Nosferatu, Strigoi. I've been called many names." He turned to face her fully. "But I chose to be something else, something Brother Maxim would have recognized. I chose to find people like you, people who'd been taught to bleed quietly, and remind them they were worth more than their suffering." The room felt smaller suddenly, charged with revelation. "So I'm a project," Ilara said quietly. "A charity case." "No." Constantine crossed to her in 2 strides, kneeling so they were eye level. You're a girl who survived when survival meant more than most people will ever understand. You're someone who kept their softness despite every reason to become hard. He hesitated, and for the first time, he looked uncertain. You're the first person in 2 centuries who made me remember why I made the choice I did. I don't understand. You will. He stood. For now, rest, heal. Tomorrow, we'll begin teaching you what it means to live instead of just survive. He was at the door when she called his name. Constantine? He paused. Thank you. His smile was sad and infinite. Don't thank me yet, Ilara. Salvation is harder than suffering. Freedom is more terrifying than any cage. And learning to believe you deserve kindness. He shook his head. That's the hardest lesson of all. After he left, Ilara lay in her borrowed bed and stared at the ceiling. For the first time in years, she didn't fall asleep listening for footsteps that meant pain was coming. She fell asleep listening to silence. And silence, she was beginning to learn, could sound like mercy. Like if you believe healing begins when someone sees your worth before you do. 3 weeks passed in a rhythm Ilara had never known existed. Days where she woke without fear. Meals where she sat at tables instead of serving them. Evenings where she read books from Constantine's library. Thousands of volumes in dozens of languages collected across centuries. Her ankle began to heal. Not the old injury, that scar tissue was permanent, but the constant inflammation from standing 14 hours a day on stone floors. Mrs. Halloway made her soak it in herbal baths. Margaret brought her shoes with cushioned soles. And Constantine. Constantine watched from the margins of her new life like a guardian shadow, present but never intrusive. He kept his unusual hours, appearing only after sunset, disappearing before dawn. The household understood, but didn't discuss it. There were things one simply accepted when living under an immortal's roof. Tonight, Ilara found him in the conservatory. It was her favorite room in the manor, all glass and moonlight, filled with night-blooming flowers that released their perfume only after dark. Constantine stood among white jasmine and evening primrose, reading a letter by candlelight. "Bad news?" she asked. He looked up, and something in his expression made her breath catch. Not danger, something else. Something that made her aware of how close they were standing, how the candlelight caught in his dark eyes like trapped stars. "An old friend," he said quietly, "reminding me that mercy has limits, that some debts can never be repaid." Ilara moved closer, her limp barely noticeable now. "What kind of debt?" "The kind where you save someone, and they spend eternity wondering if they deserved saving." He set the letter down. "Tell me something, Ilara. Do you ever wonder why I chose you? Out of all the suffering in London, all the cruelty I could have intervened in, why that night? Why that moment? Why you?" "Every day," she admitted. "What conclusion have you reached?" She considered lying, but his eyes were too old for pretty falsehoods. "That you see yourself in broken things. That maybe you're trying to save yourself by saving people like me." His smile was genuine for the first time in weeks. Dangerously perceptive. "Has anyone ever told you that intelligence is more devastating than beauty?" "No one's ever told me I had either." Something shifted in the air between them. He took a step closer, and she noticed details she'd been trying not to notice. The way his shirt collar exposed the hollow of his throat. The way his hands moved with centuries of controlled grace. The way he looked at her like she was something rare rather than ruined. "You're healing," he observed. "Thanks to you." "No, despite me." His jaw tightened. "I brought you here selfishly, Ilara. I told myself it was mercy, but the truth is darker than that." "What truth?" He turned away, but she caught his arm. His skin was cool beneath her touch, but not cold, not dead, just different. 800 years, he said without looking at her. 8 centuries of existing without truly living. Do you know what happens to immortals who outlive their purpose? We become hollow, mechanical. We go through the motions of our convictions without remembering why we held them. He finally met her eyes. And then you bled quietly on that marble floor, and I remembered. Remembered what? Why suffering matters. Why one person's pain is worth stopping, even when the world is full of pain. Why? He reached out, his fingers hovering near her face but not quite touching. Why being alive means feeling things that make existence unbearable and beautiful simultaneously. Ilara's heart hammered against her ribs. Are you saying? I'm saying you didn't just let me save you. You saved me from becoming the kind of monster who stops caring. His hand dropped. And now I'm in the impossible position of being grateful to you while knowing that gratitude could become something else. Something that would make me no better than the people who hurt you. Understanding crashed over her like cold water. You're afraid you'll fall in love with me. I'm afraid I already have. The admission seemed to cost him something. And I'm terrified that my love will be just another cage, another person taking from you instead of giving you the freedom you deserve. The conservatory fell silent, except for the whisper of night wind through jasmine. Ilara had spent her entire life being told what she was worth. Nothing, less than nothing, a burden that should be grateful for scraps. And here was an immortal, ancient and powerful, worried that his love might imprison her. What if, she said slowly, what if I told you that this is the first time I've ever felt free enough to choose? That every other moment of my life, I've been reacting, surviving, enduring. But right now, standing here with you, I can actually decide what I want? His eyes searched hers. What do you want? She took his hand, that careful, deadly hand that had spent centuries learning to be gentle, and pressed it to her cheek. His skin was cool silk against her warmth, and she watched his expression crack into something vulnerable and ancient. I want to stop being afraid of kindness, she said. I want to learn that love doesn't have to hurt, that I can be cared for without becoming less than myself. She turned her face into his palm. And I want to understand what it means to be seen by someone who's had 800 years to learn what's actually worth seeing. Ilara, I'm not saying I love you, she interrupted. Not yet. I don't know if what I feel is love or gratitude or just the absence of pain for the first time in my life. But I know I want the chance to find out, without you deciding for me that I'm too damaged to choose. He closed his eyes, and she realized with shock that they were wet. Vampires could cry. The myths hadn't mentioned that. You terrify me, he whispered. Good. I'm tired of being the only one who's afraid. He pulled her close then, not in passion, but in something deeper. Two people who'd learned that survival wasn't the same as living, finding each other in the wreckage of what they'd both been through. His arms were careful around her, giving her room to pull away if she needed to. She didn't pull away. If we do this, he said against her hair, if we try this thing between us, you have to promise me something. What? That if I ever make you feel less than cherished, if I ever make you afraid, if I ever treat your heart like something I own instead of something you're choosing to share, you'll leave. You'll take everything I have and disappear, and you won't let guilt or gratitude or love make you stay. Ilara pulled back enough to look at him. That's a strange thing to promise. It's the only thing worth promising. I've seen too many immortals trap the mortals they love in gilded cages. I won't become that. His thumb traced her cheekbone. You deserve a love that makes you larger, Ilara, not smaller. Then that's what we'll build, she said. Together. Outside, church bells chimed midnight. In the distance, London slept, a city of 1 million suffering souls, most of whom would never be saved. But here, in a conservatory full of night-blooming flowers, two broken things were learning that healing could be shared, that mercy could be mutual, that love, when chosen freely, was the only thing worth being immortal for. CTA. And now, I invite you to leave a trace of your presence in the comments. Tell us where in the world you're watching from and the exact hour you hear this story. We wish to know how far these immortal confessions travel, and at what moments of the night they find you. Winter descended on London like a benediction. Snow softened the city's harsh edges, turning everything into a Gothic fairy tale. Inside Constantine's manor, Alara discovered that healing was slower and stranger than she'd imagined. Some days she woke with anxiety clawing at her chest, certain she'd be punished for sleeping past dawn. Other days she found herself apologizing for existing, for eating food, for taking up space, for breathing air that could have belonged to someone more deserving. Constantine met each fractured moment with patient consistency. When she apologized for finishing her breakfast, he reminded her that hunger was meant to be satisfied. When she flinched at raised voices from the street outside, he sat with her until her breathing steadied. When she woke screaming from nightmares of the Ashford Manor, he appeared in her doorway with tea and quiet company. "You don't have to stay," she told him one night, embarrassed by her weakness. "I don't do anything I don't want to do," he replied. "I've had 800 years to master that particular skill." They developed rituals. Every evening after sunset, they walked the garden paths together. She told him about her childhood before the manor, a father who drank, a mother who died of typhoid when Alara was 8, siblings scattered to workhouses and worse. He told her about medieval Ukraine, about brothers who'd betrayed him, about the loneliness of watching centuries pass while everyone you loved turned to dust. "Don't you get tired?" she asked one night as snow fell around them. "Of living while everything dies?" Every single day. He caught a snowflake on his palm, watched it melt from his cool skin more slowly than it should. "But then I remember Brother Maxim, how he chose to see humanity in me when I'd forgotten I had any. And I think, if I can do that for even one person, if I can be someone's brother Maxim, then maybe this curse has purpose." Ilara stopped walking. "Is that what I am to you? A project that gives your immortality meaning?" He turned to face her fully, snow catching in his dark hair like stars. "You were, for about 3 days. Then you became something infinitely more complicated." "Which is?" "Someone I want to wake up for. Someone whose happiness matters more than my guilt. Someone who—" He reached out, his fingers ghosting along her jaw. "Someone who makes me wish I could grow old with them." The confession hung in the frozen air between them. "I don't want you to grow old," Alara said softly. "I want you exactly as you are." "Ilara, you don't understand what you're saying. I can't age, can't die except by very specific means. If you stay with me, you'll watch yourself change while I remain frozen. You'll grow sick, weaken, fade, and I'll still look like this. So turn me." The words escaped before she could stop them. Constantine's expression shuddered immediately. "No." "Why not?" "Because making that choice requires absolute certainty, and you've only been free for 6 weeks. His voice was firm, brooking no argument. "Because transformation is agony and irreversible. Because I won't trap you in eternity before you've even learned to live in the present." "But, no, Alara." He cupped her face in both hands, forcing her to meet his eyes. "Listen to me. If in 5 years, 10 years, 50 years, you still want this, if you've lived a full mortal life and decided eternity with me is worth giving up sunlight, growing old, having children, dying naturally, then we'll revisit this conversation. But right now, you're confusing love with escape, and I won't let you make that mistake." Tears froze on her cheeks. "You don't want me forever." "I want you forever so desperately it terrifies me." His thumb traced her lower lip. But I want you to choose forever after you've actually experienced what you'd be giving up. Right now, you're still learning what it means to be free. Don't trade one cage for another, even if this one comes with immortality and my devotion. She understood, even as it hurt. He was right. She was still thinking like someone who needed to be saved, not someone who deserved to choose. Then teach me, she said. Teach me to live before I decide about forever. His smile was sad and proud simultaneously. That's exactly what I intended. The next morning, afternoon, since she was adapting to his nocturnal schedule, Mrs. Halloway appeared with an announcement. Lord Constantine has arranged something for you, a tutor. Ilara's stomach dropped. I don't need, not that kind of tutor. Mrs. Halloway's eyes twinkled. Come see. In the music room, a woman waited beside a pianoforte. She was perhaps 50, with elegant hands and a kind face that had seen its share of sorrow. This is Madame Leroux, Constantine said from the doorway. She's going to teach you to play. I can't afford. Good thing I can. He leaned against the doorframe, watching her with that expression that made her feel simultaneously seen and safe. You told me once that you used to hear the Ashfords play at their parties, that you'd stand outside the music room and wish you could understand what made those sounds beautiful. Ilara remembered. She'd mentioned it weeks ago, barely a throwaway comment. You remembered, she whispered. I remember everything about you. He straightened. The music is yours, Ilara, not something you serve. Not something you observe from the servants' corridor. Yours. Over the following weeks, Madame Leroux taught her scales and theory, patience and discipline. Ilara's fingers, scarred from years of rough work, slowly learned grace. She butchered Mozart and Chopin, fumbled through Bach, and gradually began to understand that beauty could be made, not just witnessed. Constantine would sit in the corner during her lessons, reading or writing correspondence, but she knew he was listening. Sometimes, when she finally got a passage right, she'd look up to find him watching her with an expression that made her heart stutter, pride and longing and something darker that she was beginning to recognize as desire restrained. One night, after Madame Leroux had left, Ilara played for him alone. Not perfectly. Not even particularly well, but honestly, which was more important. When she finished, he crossed the room and sat beside her on the piano bench. Their bodies touched from shoulder to hip, that careful proximity they'd been dancing around for weeks. You're getting better, he said. I'm getting less terrible. Same thing. He placed his hands on the keys beside hers. May I? She nodded. He played something she didn't recognize. Ancient and haunting, a melody from centuries past. His fingers moved with inhuman precision, but the emotion behind the notes was entirely human. Grief and hope and loneliness that had learned to sing. What is that? She asked when he finished. A lullaby from before I turned. My mother used to sing it. His voice was distant. I haven't played it in 200 years. Didn't think I remembered it until tonight. Why tonight? He looked at her, and the vulnerability in his eyes made her chest ache. Because you make me remember what it felt like to be human, to want things simply because they're beautiful, not because they serve some greater purpose. His hand covered hers on the keys. You make me want to be mortal again, just for a day, just to experience this with a heart that can actually break. Your heart breaks just fine, she said softly. I've seen it. Then you see more than I thought possible. She turned toward him, their faces inches apart. Constantine, what are we doing? Falling in love the slowest way I know how. His lips quirked, which, given my age, is still probably faster than most mortals manage. And then what? Then you decide. When you're ready. Not before. She kissed him then, quick and chaste, before courage could abandon her. His lips were cool against hers, but they warmed beneath her touch, and when she pulled back, his eyes had darkened to something molten. "Ilara, just one," she said, "just so I know what it feels like to choose you, even if it's only for a moment." He rested his forehead against hers, breathing unnecessary breath, trembling with restraint. "You're going to destroy me," he whispered. "Good," she replied. "Someone should." Outside, snow continued to fall on a city that would never know their story. Inside, in a room full of music and moonlight, two people learned that eternity began with single moments chosen freely, that love was built from patience and piano lessons, that some cages, when entered willingly, became homes instead. Spring arrived with tentative warmth, and with it, Ilara's first real test of her newfound freedom. Lady Ashford appeared at the manor's gates, unannounced. Mrs. Halloway found Ilara in the library, panic already tightening her features. "She's demanding to see Lord Constantine. Says she has business regarding a theft." Ilara's blood turned to ice. "Theft?" "She's claiming you stole jewelry when you left." It was a lie, of course. Ilara hadn't even taken the servant's uniform she'd been wearing. Constantine had bought her new clothes, knew everything. But lies dressed in authority had power, especially lies told by wealthy women about former servants. Constantine appeared like a shadow given form, his face carved from cold fury. "Where is she?" "The entrance hall. I told her to wait outside, but—" "Good." He turned to Ilara, and his expression softened fractionally. "Stay here. This won't take long." "She's lying," Ilara said, hating the tremor in her voice. "I didn't take anything." "I know." He touched her cheek gently. "Trust me." She did. But old fears died hard, and she found herself following at a distance, staying in the shadows of the upper gallery where she could watch without being seen. Lady Ashford looked exactly as Ilara remembered, beautiful and cruel, dressed in expensive silk that probably cost more than most families earned in a year. She stood in the entrance hall like she owned it, imperious and cold. Constantine descended the stairs with lethal grace. "Lady Ashford, to what do I owe this intrusion?" "Don't play innocent with me, Constantine." Her voice dripped venom. "That crippled thief you bought from me stole a ruby necklace worth £3,000. I want it returned, or I want her arrested." Fascinating. Constantine's smile was a blade hidden in velvet. "Tell me, when exactly did this theft occur?" "The night you took her. I've only just discovered it missing." 3 months later. His skepticism was palpable. How convenient. She must have hidden it before leaving. She left with nothing but the clothes I provided. Constantine moved closer, and Lady Ashford actually took a step back. But let's say, hypothetically, that Ilara did steal this necklace. Why would she? What value would it have to a girl who'd been systematically beaten, starved, and degraded for years? Why risk everything for jewelry she couldn't sell without being caught? Lady Ashford's jaw tightened. Because thieves steal. It's their nature. No. Constantine's voice dropped to something dangerous. People steal when they're desperate. When they've been denied everything that makes life bearable. When the only power they have left is taking something back from those who took everything from them first. He circled her slowly, a predator assessing prey. "But Ilara didn't steal from you. Do you know how I know? Because you're blinded by whatever pathetic infatuation, because I bought her contract. I own every moment of her time in your household. And if she did steal this necklace, which she didn't, then by law, you would have reported it immediately to collect insurance." His smile sharpened. "But you didn't report it, did you? Because there is no necklace. There's only a woman whose pride was wounded when I publicly humiliated her in front of London society." Lady Ashford's face mottled with rage. "How dare you? How dare I?" Constantine's laugh was razors wrapped in silk. "You beat a crippled girl for accidentally dropping wine. You would have done worse if I hadn't intervened. And now you come to my home, spouting lies about theft, thinking you can intimidate me into returning her to your tender mercies. She's a servant. She's a human being. The temperature dropped 10 degrees. And you will never speak her name again. You will leave this property. You will tell everyone in London that you were mistaken about the theft. And if I hear even a whisper of rumor about Elara Winters, if I catch even a hint that you've spread lies about her character, I will spend the next year systematically dismantling everything you care about. Lady Ashford's eyes widened. You wouldn't. I would. Constantine leaned in close. I've lived 800 years, Lady Ashford. I've toppled kingdoms. I've watched dynasties crumble. Your family's fortune, your husband's reputation, your position in society, these are sandcastles, and I am the tide. For a long moment, they stared at each other. Then Lady Ashford's courage broke, and she turned toward the door. This isn't over, she spat. Yes, Constantine said quietly, it is. After she left, silence filled the entrance hall like a held breath. Constantine stood motionless, his hands clenched into fists, his jaw tight with suppressed rage. Elara emerged from the shadows. You heard, he said without turning. All of it. He finally looked at her, and the fury in his eyes was banked, but not extinguished. She'll spread rumors anyway. London society thrives on scandal. By tomorrow, there will be whispers about you, about us, about... I don't care. Elara crossed the distance between them. Let them whisper. Let them think whatever they want. It will make your life difficult. My life has always been difficult. She took his hand, felt the tension vibrating through him. The difference is now I have someone who fights for me instead of against me. His fingers tightened around hers. I wanted to kill her, for what she did to you, for what she still tries to do. I wanted to tear her apart. But you didn't. Only because you wouldn't want me to. He pulled her close, not gently but with desperate intensity. Do you understand what you've done to me? For 800 years I've maintained perfect control, perfect restraint. And then you limp into my life bleeding and apologizing, and suddenly I'm ready to commit murder over rumors. Elara pressed her hand to his chest, feeling no heartbeat beneath. Is that a bad thing? It's a terrifying thing. He rested his chin on top of her head. It means I'm not just falling in love with you anymore. It means I've fallen, completely, irrevocably, in ways that would make me dangerous if you decided to leave. Then it's good I'm not leaving. You should. You should run from me. I'm possessive and ancient and... She pulled back enough to look at him. And you threatened to destroy a woman's entire life because she lied about me. And you're terrified of your own capacity for violence. And you think wanting to protect me makes you a monster. Doesn't it? No. She touched his face, feeling the cool marble of his skin, the centuries carved into his features. It makes you someone who loves me, messy and complicated and a little bit savage, but love nonetheless. His eyes searched hers. You're not afraid of what I could do? I'm terrified, but not of you. She smiled slightly. I'm afraid of how much I need you, how much I'm starting to depend on your strength when I should be finding my own. How easy it would be to let you fight all my battles while I hide behind you. Understanding dawned in his expression. You want to face her yourself. Eventually. When I'm ready. Elara straightened her shoulders. Right now, I'm still learning to be brave. Still learning that I deserve to take up space, to be angry about what was done to me, to expect better from the world. But someday... She met his eyes steadily. Someday, I want to look Lady Ashford in the face and tell her exactly what I survived because of her. And I want to do it without needing you to protect me. Constantine's smile was proud and sad simultaneously. That's the bravest thing anyone said to me in 2 centuries. Yeah, well, she leaned into him. I learned it from a vampire who spent 800 years choosing mercy over vengeance. not always successfully enough. They stood together in the entrance hall as afternoon sun streamed through windows he couldn't safely stand in, warming her skin while he remained in shadow. It was a metaphor for their entire relationship, her growing toward light while he remained forever in darkness, yet somehow still managing to touch. "Constantine?" "Thank you for defending me, for meaning it when you said I deserve better." He kissed the top of her head. "You deserve everything, Alara, and I'm going to spend however long you'll let me making sure you believe that." Outside, London churned with scandal and rumor. Inside, two people learned that love wasn't just attraction or affection or desire. It was choosing to stand together when standing alone would be easier. It was believing someone deserved protection without making them weak. It was learning that healing required both strength and surrender. And sometimes it was simply being held by someone who'd survived 800 years of loneliness and decided you were worth learning tenderness for. Summer brought long twilights and difficult questions. Alara had been with Constantine for 7 months. 7 months of healing, learning, transforming from the girl who apologized for breathing into someone who was beginning to recognize her own strength. Mrs. Halloway said she carried herself differently now, shoulders back, head high, voice steady when she spoke. But transformation was neither linear nor complete. Tonight, she found Constantine in his study, surrounded by correspondence that spanned continents. Letters from other immortals she'd learned. A network of creatures who'd chosen mercy over monstrosity, who'd spent centuries trying to be better than their curse dictated. "You're brooding," she observed from the doorway. He looked up with a slight smile. "I prefer contemplating." "Same thing, fancier vocabulary." She entered the study, now comfortable claiming space in rooms that had once felt forbidden. "What's wrong?" Constantine set down the letter he'd been reading. "I received an invitation, a gathering of old friends in Vienna. They meet every 50 years to remember why we chose this path instead of the alternative. You should go. I don't want to leave you." The admission hung in the air between them. 7 months, and they'd barely spent more than a few hours apart. It wasn't healthy. Alara knew that intellectually, but emotionally, the thought of him leaving made her chest tighten with old fears. "How long would you be gone?" she asked. 3 weeks? Maybe 4? "That's not so long. Alara." He stood, crossed to her, cupped her face in both hands. "Tell me the truth. Not what you think I want to hear. Can you imagine 3 weeks without me? Or does the thought make you panic?" She wanted to lie, wanted to be strong and independent and completely healed. But he'd taught her that honesty was more important than pride. "It makes me panic," she admitted. "Not because I think you won't come back, but because I've built my entire new life around you. You're my safety, my strength, my reason for existing, and that's not healthy, is it?" His smile was sad. "No, love, it's not. I don't want to be that person, the one who can't function without you, the one who trades being the Ashford servant for being yours. You're not my servant. I know, but I'm not independent either." She pulled back from his touch, needing space to think clearly. "I need to learn to be alone, to be strong without you, to know that I can survive and thrive on my own before I can truly choose to be with you." Constantine's expression suggested he'd been waiting for this conversation. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying you should go to Vienna, and while you're gone, I should try living, actually living, not just existing in your shadow, however kind that shadow is." What would that look like? She'd been thinking about this for weeks, the idea growing slowly like dawn. Mrs. Halloway mentioned that her sister runs a boarding house for working women, teachers, nurses, shop clerks, women who support themselves. Alara met his eyes. "I want to try that, get a position somewhere. Learn to earn my own living. Become someone who chooses you instead of someone who needs you. The silence stretched between them, thick with implications. "You're not leaving me," Constantine said carefully. "You're leaving to find yourself." "Is there a difference?" "All the difference in the world." He sat down heavily, suddenly looking every one of his 800 years. "But that doesn't mean it hurts less. I'm not doing this to hurt you. I know." He held up a hand. "I know, Ilara, and the terrible truth is, you're absolutely right. You need to learn to stand alone before you can truly choose to stand beside someone." He laughed bitterly. "I just wish I'd been the one wise enough to suggest it, instead of loving you so selfishly that you had to figure it out yourself." "Constantine." "No, let me finish." He stood again, pacing the study like a caged wolf. "When I brought you here, I told myself I was saving you, giving you freedom. But what I really gave you was a prettier cage, different bars, kinder jailer, but still a cage nonetheless. That's not true. It is." He turned to face her, and his eyes were raw with self-awareness. "I isolated you here, surrounded you with my household, my resources, my protection. I made myself indispensable to your healing, and now you're dependent on me in ways that feel like love, but might just be trauma bonding." The words landed like blows because they contained truth she'd been trying not to see. "So what do we do?" she asked quietly. "We do exactly what you suggested. I go to Vienna. You move to Mrs. Halloway's sister's boarding house. You get a position, teaching music perhaps, or tutoring. Something that uses the skills we've been developing but allows you to stand on your own." He crossed to her slowly. "And we wait." "For what?" "For you to discover who Ilara Winters is when she's not surviving the Ashfords' cruelty or living in Constantine's shadow." He touched her cheek gently. "For you to wake up one morning and choose me, not because I saved you, not because you're grateful, not because you're afraid to be alone, but because you genuinely want to build a life with someone who sees you clearly and loves what he sees." Tears burned her eyes. "And if I discover I don't want that, if I find out I only loved you because you rescued me, then you'll have learned the most important thing of all, that you deserve to be chosen, not just to choose." He smiled, though it looked like it hurt. "And I'll be grateful I had 7 months with you, that I got to be someone's brother Maxim, that I fell in love with someone brave enough to leave me so she could learn to come back freely. You're a better man than you think you are. I'm not a man at all, but I'm trying to be a better monster." They spent the rest of the night talking through practicalities. Mrs. Halloway would introduce Ilara to her sister within the week. Constantine would arrange a position for her at a music school, not through obvious influence, but through quiet recommendations that looked like merit. They would write letters, but wouldn't see each other until he returned from Vienna. 4 weeks. 4 weeks of learning to be separate before they decided whether being together made sense. On his last night before leaving, Constantine found her in the conservatory among the night-blooming flowers. "I have something for you," he said. He handed her a small wooden box. Inside was a silver necklace, simple, elegant, with a pendant shaped like a crescent moon. "My mother gave this to me the night I left home," he said quietly. "Before I killed that man in the duel, before I was disowned, before everything that made me what I am." He fastened it around her neck with careful fingers. "It's the only thing I still own from my mortal life, the only piece of the boy I was before the monster. Constantine, I can't, you can, and you will." He turned her to face him. "Because it reminds me that transformation is possible, that the boy who wore this became something he never imagined, that endings can be beginnings if you're brave enough to survive the space between." She touched the pendant, warm from his hands. "What if I break it?" "Then you'll have proven it was real enough to break." He kissed her forehead. "That's all any of us can hope for, to love something enough that losing it would hurt. I don't want to lose you. Then don't. Come back after you've learned to live without me. Choose me when choosing me doesn't mean losing yourself." His smile was infinitely sad. "That's the only kind of love that lasts, Alara. The kind that survives absence. The kind that exists because two people want it to, not because they need it to." She kissed him then, not chaste like before, but deep and desperate and full of everything she felt but couldn't articulate. His arms came around her, holding her like she was precious and fragile and strong all at once. When they pulled apart, both were breathing hard, despite only one of them needing to breathe at all. 4 weeks, she said. 4 weeks, he agreed. And then we'll see if mercy can save us both. The next evening, she moved her few belongings to Mrs. Halloway's sister's boarding house. It was modest but clean, a shared room with another young woman, a communal dining room, strict rules about male visitors and curfews. Nothing like the luxury of Constantine's manor. It felt like freedom. That first night, lying in an unfamiliar bed next to a stranger's gentle snoring, Alara touched the crescent moon pendant and wondered if she'd made the right choice. If she'd thrown away happiness because she was too damaged to recognize it. If Constantine would wait, or move on, or forget her in the way immortals forgot all the brief mortal loves that passed through their endless lives. But then she remembered, healing meant learning to be alone before learning to be together. Growth meant risking loss for the chance of something real. And love, real love, meant trusting that what was meant to be yours would find its way back, even across 4 weeks, even across 800 years, even across the space between mortal and immortal, broken and healing, alone and together. She fell asleep clutching the pendant, and for the first time in her life, she wasn't afraid of tomorrow. 3 weeks passed in a blur of transformation. Alara secured a position at Miss Pemberton's Music Academy, teaching piano to daughters of merchants and clerks. The pay was modest, but it was hers, earned through her own skill, not given through someone else's mercy. She shared a cramped room with Catherine, a nurse who worked night shifts at St. Bartholomew's Hospital. They became unlikely friends. "Your gentleman writes often," Catherine observed one evening, watching Alara read another letter from Vienna. "He's not my gentleman. Not yet." Alara folded the letter carefully. "We're figuring things out." "Figuring out if you love him or if you just loved being saved?" Alara looked up sharply. Catherine shrugged. "I've seen it before. Women who confuse rescue with romance usually ends badly." "What if it's both?" Alara asked quietly. "What if I love him and I'm grateful? Does that make it less real?" "Depends. Can you imagine your life without him? Not just survive it? Actually imagine being happy, fulfilled, complete on your own?" That night, Alara tried. Lay in her narrow bed and pictured a future without Constantine. A life of teaching music, paying her own rent, making her own choices, visiting museums on Sundays, reading books she chose. Perhaps someday meeting someone else, someone mortal and ordinary and safe. The image felt hollow, but it also felt possible. That was the difference. 3 weeks ago, imagining life without Constantine had felt like imagining life without breathing. Now it felt sad, diminished, but survivable. Progress. She wrote him that night, "I miss you, but I'm learning that missing you isn't the same as needing you. I think that's what you wanted me to learn. I think I'm finally understanding." His response came 3 days later. "I'm learning too. That love which demands presence isn't trust. That if I truly care for your happiness, I must be willing to let you discover it exists independent of me. Vienna is beautiful, but every street corner makes me wish you were here to see it. Not because you'd make me happy, but because I want to share happiness with you. There's a difference. Come back when you've learned to see it too." Week 4 arrived with autumn chill and a crisis. One of Alara's students, a shy girl named Beatrice, came to lessons with bruises on her wrists. When Elara asked gently, the truth spilled out. An uncle who drank, a mother who looked away, a household where music lessons were the only escape from violence. Elara saw herself in those frightened eyes. "What do I do?" Beatrice whispered. "Where can I go?" For the first time, Elara didn't think Constantine would know. She thought, I know. She took Beatrice to Mrs. Halloway's sister, arranged for the girl to stay temporarily while they contacted authorities, used her own meager savings to pay the first week's board, sat with Beatrice through the fear and tears and uncertainty. "How did you know what to do?" the girl asked. "Because someone did it for me once," Elara replied, "and now I'm learning to pass it forward." That night, she realized something profound. Constantine had taught her mercy, but she'd learned to practice it independently. She'd become her own rescuer by learning to rescue others. The next day, Constantine returned from Vienna. She met him in the conservatory at dusk, neutral ground, neither his manor nor her boarding house. He looked exactly as she remembered, beautiful, ancient, cautious, but she saw him differently now. Not as savior or master or necessity, as choice. "You look different," he observed. "I am different." She touched the crescent moon pendant still around her neck. "I helped someone this week, a student being hurt at home, and I didn't think, what would Constantine do? I just knew, because you taught me, and then I learned to do it myself." His smile was genuine. "That's all I wanted. For you to discover you're strong enough to be kind without needing me to show you how." "I am." She stepped closer. "But I also discovered something else." "What?" "That being strong enough to survive without you doesn't mean I want to." She took his hands, cool and steady and infinitely patient. "I don't need you, Constantine, not anymore. But I choose you, not because you saved me, but because you taught me to save myself and then stepped back to let me do it. Not because I'm afraid to be alone, but because being together makes both of us better than we are apart." His eyes glistened. That impossible vampire trick she'd learned to recognize as emotion too large for words. "Are you sure? Absolutely certain? Because if you choose this, choose me, I need to know it's real. That in 10 years, 50 years, when you're older and I'm not, you won't resent." She kissed him silent, deep and sure and full of everything she'd learned about herself in 4 weeks of solitude. "I'm sure," she said against his lips. "I'm choosing eternity, not because I'm afraid of mortality, but because I've lived both. The small life I had before you, and this larger life I've built with your help. And I know which one I want. I want to spend centuries learning to be kind, learning to save people the way you saved me, the way I'm learning to save others. Learning to love you not as savior, but as partner. Elara, turn me." Her voice didn't waver. "Not tonight, not this week, but soon, when I'm ready, when we're both sure. Make me immortal so I can spend eternity practicing the mercy you taught me." Constantine pulled her close, and she felt his chest, which never rose with breath, shudder with something like a sob. "You'll have to give up so much. Sunlight, aging, children, death. I'm giving up one life for another. That's all any transformation is." She looked up at him. "You did it. 800 years ago. You chose mercy over monstrosity. Let me choose the same thing. Let me become like you, not a monster, but a creature trying very hard to be better than its nature. It will hurt. Everything that matters hurts." She smiled. "You taught me that too." They stood together in the conservatory as darkness fell completely, and Elara realized this was the first time she'd made a major choice without fear, without desperation, without anything except clear-eyed knowledge of what she wanted. This was freedom. This was love. This was choosing eternity with eyes wide open. They waited 6 more months. not because they doubted, but because transformation demanded absolute certainty. Alara continued teaching, continued growing, continued proving to herself daily that she chose immortality from strength, not weakness. She turned 24 in spring. Constantine gave her a trip to Paris, her first time leaving England, her first taste of the world she'd be exploring for centuries. They walked along the Seine at midnight, visited Notre Dame before dawn, stood in the Louvre among art that would outlast empires. "This is what forever looks like," he told her, "seeing beauty age while you remain constant, watching everything you love fade except the person beside you." "Then I'll love carefully," she replied, "and I'll love you longest." On a June evening, she came to him with final certainty. "I'm ready." He'd prepared a room in his manor specifically for this, sparse and clean, with a bed and medical supplies and everything needed for transformation's violence. Dr. Morrison waited, a vampire physician who'd overseen countless turnings. "Last chance to change your mind," Constantine said, his voice tight with barely controlled emotion. "I won't." Alara lay on the bed, calm despite everything. "I've lived enough to know what I'm choosing. I've been independent enough to know this is partnership, not dependence. I've loved you long enough to know it's real." Dr. Morrison explained the process clinically. Constantine's venom would stop her heart, rewrite her cells, transform her over 3 agonizing days. She'd experience death and rebirth simultaneously. Many didn't survive the pain, simply let go because fighting hurt too much. "You have to want to live," Dr. Morrison said, "even when dying seems easier." "I've survived worse," Alara replied, thinking of the Ashford Manor, the beatings, the years of systematic cruelty. "I know how to survive." Constantine knelt beside the bed, his face carved with ancient grief. "I'll stay with you the entire time, every moment of pain. I won't leave." "I know." She touched his face. "That's why I'm not afraid." He bent to her throat, and she felt his lips against her pulse, the last heartbeat she'd feel as mortal. He whispered against her skin, "I love you, not because you're broken or because I saved you, because you're the bravest person I've known in 800 years. "Then make me brave forever," she whispered back. The bite was sudden, sharp, intimate. His venom entered her bloodstream like liquid fire, and for a moment, everything was clarity and connection and choice. Then the pain began. It was worse than she'd imagined, worse than every beating, every cruelty, every moment of suffering combined. Her body was being unmade and remade simultaneously, every cell screaming in protest, every nerve ending ablaze. She wanted to die, wanted to let go, drift away, escape into darkness. But Constantine's voice anchored her. "Stay with me, Alara. Stay. You're strong enough. You've always been strong enough." And she remembered. She'd survived the Ashfords, survived being taught she was worthless, survived healing from that lie. This was just another survival, another transformation, another choice to keep living when dying was easier. 3 days passed in fire and agony. On the 3rd evening, something shifted. The pain crested and broke like a wave, and in its wake came clarity, heightened senses, strength, immortality. She opened her eyes, new eyes that saw in darkness, that caught every detail in impossible focus. Constantine sat beside her, haggard from 3 days of vigil, beautiful in his worry. "Hello," she said, and her voice was her own, but different, richer, stronger. "Hello, love." His smile was infinite relief. "Welcome to eternity." She sat up slowly, testing her new body. Everything felt sharper, more present, more real. She could hear Mrs. Halloway's heartbeat 3 rooms away, could smell the night-blooming jasmine from the conservatory, could feel the texture of sheets against skin with overwhelming intensity. "It's so much," she whispered. It is. For the first few years, everything will be overwhelming, but you'll learn control. I'll teach you. She looked at her hands, pale now. Marble smooth, strong enough to break stone. Hands that would never age, never weaken, never fail her again. What now? She asked. Now we learn to be immortal together. Constantine helped her stand, steadied her as she adjusted to inhuman grace. We find people who need saving. We practice mercy across centuries. We prove that monsters can choose to be better than their nature. And we love each other, she added. And we love each other. He pulled her close, and for the first time, they were matched. Equal strength, equal immortality, equal choice. Not because either of us is broken, but because we're both committed to staying whole together. They sealed it with a kiss that tasted of blood and eternity and promises that would outlast empires. Outside, London slept, millions of mortals living their brief, beautiful lives. Inside, two immortals began learning what forever meant when chosen freely. They asked her if she regretted trading mortality for love. She asked them if they regretted never finding love worth trading mortality for. 5 years later, Elara stood in the conservatory at midnight, playing Chopin with immortal precision. Her fingers no longer stumbled. Her music no longer hesitated. She'd had 5 years to practice, and practice when you had eternity meant mastery. Constantine listened from the doorway, watching his wife. They'd married quietly, legally, permanently, become more herself with every passing year. You're staring, she said without looking up. I'm admiring. There's a difference. She finished the nocturne, turned to face him with a smile that still made him feel 800 years younger. Mrs. Morrison wrote, There's a situation in Manchester, a factory where girls are being... I know. He crossed to her. I thought we might travel there tomorrow, together. This was their life now, finding cruelty and stopping it, using their immortal resources to create change, being Brother Maxim for people who needed someone to believe they deserved better. They'd saved 17 people in 5 years, paid debts, bought contracts, offered sanctuary. Some stayed briefly, some stayed longer, some left to build independent lives. All of them learned the same lesson Elara had learned, that healing was possible, that kindness wasn't weakness, that broken things could become whole again. Do you ever regret it? Constantine asked quietly. Giving up sunlight, mortality, the chance to grow old naturally? Elara considered the question seriously. She'd learned not to answer reflexively, but to engage with complexity. I miss the sun sometimes, miss the idea of children, of aging alongside friends. She took his hand. But I don't regret the trade, because I'm not just living longer, I'm living larger. Every person we help, every life we change, every moment of mercy we practice, that's worth more than a lifetime of ordinary happiness. Even when it's hard? Especially when it's hard. She pulled him close. You taught me that easy things aren't usually worthwhile, that suffering can be transformed into purpose. That love, real love, asks you to be better than you thought possible. You make me sound wiser than I am. You make me braver than I was. They stood together in the moonlit conservatory, two immortals who'd chosen each other across impossible circumstances. Their love wasn't simple or easy or uncomplicated, but it was real. Built from choice and healing and the shared commitment to make mercy their life's work. Ready for Manchester? Constantine asked. Always. Elara smiled. Someone needs to be saved. Someone needs to learn they're worth saving, he corrected. Same thing. They left the manor hand in hand, two shadows moving through London's darkness, hunting for suffering they could alleviate. Behind them, the conservatory flowers continued blooming, beautiful things that flourished in darkness, proof that light wasn't necessary for growth. Only choice was necessary. only mercy. Only love that believed broken things deserved to be healed. And as they disappeared into the night, Ilara touched the crescent moon pendant she still wore after 5 years of immortality. The boy who'd owned it had become a monster who'd chosen mercy. The girl who'd received it had become an immortal who'd chosen purpose. Both of them had been saved. Both of them had learned to save others. And in the space between mortal and eternal, suffering and healing, broken and whole, they'd found the only thing worth spending eternity pursuing. Love that asked nothing except the chance to make someone believe they deserved it. Subscribe if you believe mercy can resurrect even the damned, and that love is the only immortality worth choosing. Comment, she serves no one if you believe freedom begins when someone sees your worth before you do. Follow Blood and Mercy for more immortal confessions born from darkness and devotion. Every immortal was once someone who chose not to die. Every mortal who becomes immortal chooses what they'll spend eternity becoming. Choose mercy, choose healing, choose love that transforms rather than traps. That's the only magic worth believing in. Me,